Hi, we are working between our textbook chapters 2 and 3, and we want to reemphasize and give some emphasis to some things that are very important about visual images. I don't know if you realize it or not, but you're affected by visual images every day. The colors in the sky. If it's a damp day or a stormy day or a cloudy day, you might feel one way. If it's a sunny, clear sky day, you may feel another way. We're going to learn later on that light affects color. So even if the sun shines on a tree one day, if the sun is not shining another, the color of the tree will change. But this is an exciting part of our discussion because the first thing we want to emphasize is the artist has total freedom. He or she has freedoms like no one else. They can paint an image in any colors and use any colors that they want. Everyone may not like it. And even as we embark on this chapter here, between 2 and 3, we start noticing we call it visual literacy. But we accept the fact that artists can make a face with multicolors or that a living room might be decorated in multicolors. Do you have to like it? Absolutely not. But that is the power of the artist, and in this case, the director, decorator, who is also an artist. The artist can make and create a cat with multicolors, abstraction, can take letters and chop them up and move them from one place to another, and even take the earth and manipulate the earth into a piece of sculpture. We call it earth art, and we'll talk about that as we move through. But the thing we want to go to, remember last discussion we had, we talked about the difference between content and subject matter. Subject matter being that which is described or recognized, in this case, the two female figures. On the right side, we have a figure of a woman who obviously is in a state of wind. There might be wind blowing. She's not very happy. She might be worried. And as I move around the class and as we will have in our discussions, what is she doing? What is she thinking about? What are her fears? And so we go and we try to examine what we call the content, which is the interpretation of what we see. On the left side, however, we see a young child with hands up, and we say she's praying. Well, we had to bring our experience, but all people don't pray the same way, but we recognize that child as praying for something, hoping for something, praying for someone who might be ill or a new toy or whatever. But we can put all kinds of imaginary things into what's happening in these two images. But how do we do it? We do it with media. Media, as we explained before, are multiple materials used by the artist. So in order to get both images, we either had to use a paintbrush or a camera. There are artists who violate the rules, if you want. Who is to say that her hair isn't like that? But the artist is saying her hair is, in the upper left-hand corner, exciting, moving. And that whole rendering, it looks like it's in watercolor. And it really moves because they're using curved lines. And one of the ways which we will find out in chapter 4 will be that lines can direct our eye and give us a sense of activity. Those stairs, anytime you go on an angle, diagonal angle, and you're going up or down on stairs, it's movement. It automatically depicts movement. But then look down below at that Pittsburgh building. And who is to say that a person, all the buildings in the world, And here's this artist who says, I want mine to be multicolored. And obviously, with lights, he can attract a lot of people. I had a friend in college. His father became very wealthy because he did barbecue, but the advertising was the smoke that went in the neighborhood. And if you drove down that street, most likely you might stop and get a barbecue from him. So he became very wealthy. People have ways of attracting you through the senses. Advertisers have ways of getting to you. And so here we are viewing works of art. Is she happy? Is she sad? Is she worried? Is she frightened? Even if we looked at those candle holders on the left, they are pieces of sculpture. We look at the painting above. Most people paint the trunk of a tree as being brown, but as we see, and if you really look at a tree, you will see it's multicolored. But how do we arrive here? It's through the use of paint, charcoal, all kinds of coloring material, crayons even, to create a visual image. And the artist, and in art, the art work that you see here, that artist had the freedom to express himself as he or she sees the world. There are many thoughts that come across people's minds. And all art, if we were to do the same subject matter, would be the same. In other words, we would not, we would have differences, but we use the same materials. And no one would have the exact same thing. What's happening? Is this an ordinary picture of a woman? Or do we see that the multicolors, the splashes, the quick lines, do they mean something with respect to the excitement that might be taking place in this work of art? So visual images have the power to stimulate the mind and emotions. And on the left side, we're going to study a non-objective artist or person who became famous, Jackson Pollock. And he used to take his canvases and put them on the floor, and he'd throw paint, he would drop paint. And someone might say, well, oh, anybody could do that. But no, there were ways in which sometimes he would overwork his paintings. But all he was trying to do is say in a very large way, this is movement, this is activity. And there's no doubt in your mind that when you crisscross lines and colors like that, you create activity. Whereas on the right side, we see a sense of sorrow in our eyes. We see a sense of disappointment, yet using colors that might not be natural. And so one of the areas that is very powerful in our lives, particularly relating to art, are images and verbal gestures, advertising. How do you show or advertise your kitchen, or how do you advertise the speakers? And of course, this is a multiple dimension project in which you put together the psychologists and the artists. If you're not too old to hit a hard ball now, prove it. And of course, that's the motivational poster on the right. So in advertising, and in art, and advertising are pretty close. There are messages. And in this non-objective work here, we see a message of movement, excitement. Someone might say, well, it looks like a spider web. No, it's a non-objective painting designed to stimulate your visual thinking. Then in interior design, and we're going to learn as we look at multiple interiors. By the time you finish with this course, you're going to be a super decorator for your own home, because there are some principles and some applications that I'm going to show you. One, I don't want to spend too much time on it now, but I call it 60-30-10 formula, which equals 100. But most rooms have 60% neutral color And then they have a 30% color, which is the choice. And then we have accents. Whether you know it or not, we dress like that. We have neutral skin, we have neutral shirt, and then we have a color. And then usually we have accents, which might be cufflinks, it might be a ring, it might be a watch. With young ladies, it would be necklace, earrings, but it usually is the brightest. So the 10% is the brightest and is the accent. We'll talk about that later. Then we're going to, in this particular time, look at objects. Look at that piece of sculpture on the left by Brancusi. And then look at the centerpiece from Nigeria, in which we see a face that is covered with lines. We call that scarification. Now, if you don't know the culture and the background behind that, you might think that someone was trying to distort the face. Now, in scarification in Nigeria, they take like a comb made of steel, and they actually scratch the face coming down, and then while it's bleeding, they will take sand and put in between those cuts so that when it dried, it had lines coming down. Now, that's a mark of great distinction in Nigeria, and yet, unless you understand the culture and background, it's very hard to get the real meaning of that work of art. Two pieces of sculpture on the right, the horse, one of the most magnificent animals, and in sculpture has been personified in many different ways, but that super sculptural form of a horse. And also on the bottom, we have what is called a piece of sculpture that has been put into a form that we can see on the outside, and it will remain on the outside. Across the street from Essex County College, in the courthouse, there's a bronze piece of Abraham Lincoln, and they have a bench there. And that's been there ever since I was a little boy. I often go and look over there. But the point is that was a cast in bronze. In other words, it was made first from a pliable material. It could have been wax, it could have been wood, but then what we did was we did a cast, and the cast was in metal, and of course it lasts a long time. Now, art does different things. Who would think of a museum that would look like the upper left-hand corner, but that is a museum in Europe. On the right side, you see a type of art we call op art. And then, of course, down below, we see a representational piece of a fight with all that energy. But look at the lines that crisscross. It's the line of that crisscrossing line that makes it have the activity. Here we have an office building. We have another form on the right, and this is not just a piece of box architecture. This almost looks like an abstract form. And of course, architecture can change. Then we have the mysterious. Obviously, we're underwater here. Obviously, these images are very strange. And of course, the longer we sit and view this, we can go many different ways. So there are many ways to look and view objects and artwork and the world. And there are two particular ways of seeing that I've always talked about, and you will understand it as you read your textbook and look at the works we are going to study this semester. A lot of people, I don't be critical, but they are what we call object seers. If the chair is in the way and they're going out, they never see the chair. If the car is parked there, they never notice what kind of car it is. It's just an obstacle. So some people see the world as a series of objects, never looking at its beauty, its shape, the fact that an artist designed it, its meaning or its usage or reason for existing. And we had a style in art one time called pop art, because what they did, and one artist put a toilet in the exhibit, because we see a toilet, we use a toilet, but do we really see it as something that was designed, a unique form? And then we have artistic seeing, looking at the function and artistic objects as real forms of expression and design. And then we want to talk about cultural language. You see, all art is not beautiful, but it's the expression of life through the eyes of the artist. And in our textbook on page 42, we see a work in which they use a shopping cart, but that's very satirical. Well, yes, we've seen a shopping cart, and it is a functional tool we use all the time, but I wonder if we ever really looked at its design, how it's designed. I've seen one with a place, and it has a round piece on the top where one can put their coffee cup there while they're shopping. That's the practical use. But do we really see it as a designed object? Why does it look like a basket? In this case, the artist is really making fun of the commercial art world, which seeks to go looking for art not because of its beauty or because of its power, but because of its value. And we have a whole chapter on the value of art in our textbooks. So, last but not least, some artworks are political and social statements, which we will see momentarily. Now, art value, a joy that we need to look at. Art tends to represent and present life, and then to communicate that. Art teaches, art brings knowledge, art brings messages. And these are kept in our memories, and they are passed on. Your photographic album, your family album, is a piece. And whenever you see the Hurricane Katrina or Sandy, and people go back to their homes and they look for what they've lost, the first thing they're looking for is that family album. It's not the television, it's not the refrigerator, but the precious moments that have been recorded. Now, in art, and I showed you the other day, if we take a quarter and look at it, we will see that on the head of, or engraved there, is George Washington, first president. That's a relief. Now look on the left here, and you see an example of low relief sculpture. All sculpture isn't three-dimensional. Some we have, and we call high relief, low relief, and bas relief. And so in this case, we have an example of low relief. It's one of the more famous pieces in the world by Michelangelo Buonarroti. Woman or Madonna on a stairwell. And that piece looks at dimensions. Now, within a 2 or 3 inch thickness, Michelangelo has created shadows and stairs, and then the Madonna, then you see the child behind, and then you see the children behind the larger figure there, created depth in just that little area we call low relief. Then there's a piece like this, perhaps one of the most famous artworks in the world, The Mask of Tutankhamun, found in 1922 by Howard Carter. We're going to study Egyptian art, and you'll see, look at Tutankhamun. He was born, or became pharaoh when he was 9, and he died when he was 19. Did he conquer anything? No. His tomb was the only tomb they have found without it being pilferaged up in the Valley of the Kings in Egypt. I've stood and looked at this original work in the Egyptian Museum. Of course, there was a guard standing there, looked like he was 7 feet tall, but the point is, this piece, solid gold, And then if you notice, you'll see eyeliner. And that has a tendency to be associated with feminine appearances. But in those days, the eyeliner was used to keep down and break some of the bright sun rays. So really, eyeliner was used like sunglasses. Well, this is a practical use of an understanding of art. So our major goals, we want to spark your interest. We hope we're turning you on here. We want to ignite discussion, and we don't necessarily have to agree. We want you to express yourself with power and discussion, and then we want to, most of all, provoke critical thinking. Now, in art criticism, and I said this before, but I'm going to say it again, I want you to make a note of this. It's not on the outline, and it's not in the handout. But art criticism, when we criticize, some people see that as a negative. They say, oh, you criticizing so and so. And they see it as a negative. But in art and in music and in literature, critics are there and in introspection, in comment. So let's put this definition of art criticism down. Art criticism is anything that is written or said about a work of art is art criticism. So as we write our commentary notes and reactions and interpretations and assignments, we're really writing art criticism. When at the end of the semester I ask you to do a 6-page term paper in which you look at 3 works of art and you look at them in depth and you write about them, that's art criticism. So as we move on, definition 1, art is expression. Expression about what? Life. Expression about what? Experiencing the events and circumstances of life. And everywhere you look, you'll see a record of it. Art is about expressing human emotions. And we've already seen with some of the works we've looked at this period that art can really show emotions and turn you on. Or it's an idea or experience formed with skill, and then the artist uses some medium, which is paint, stone, clay, glass, acrylics, oil paint, to express what's there. So it is necessary for the artist to give meaning to forms and to help people to feel and to think and to imagine. Now the question is, is all art beautiful? No, all art is not beautiful. Much of it tells stories about episodes in one's life. Down at the bottom is a painting by Horace Pippin, an African-American artist, and his grandmother told him the story, and he's passed away now, and he was an old man when he did this painting. But his grandmother lived during slavery time, or just before the Civil War, and there was a rebel abolitionist by the name of John Brown, and he didn't believe in slavery, which is a great thing, but the way he went about it was to go into plantations, burn the plantations down. Finally, they caught up with John Brown, and they had a public hanging, and his grandmother went to that hanging, and she told him the story. So what you see there is a pictorial representation of what John Brown heard from his grandmother, who is there with a fur, dressed up almost like a big public event. And of course, a hanging was a public event in those days to show people that they capture these abolitionists who went against slavery. On the left side, you see a work that absolutely is not beautiful. There are pieces, the face is bulging out, and you say, well, oh, what a terrible looking face. Now, I had a student, and I don't want anybody to get upset now, but I had a student one time who had a face look like that. And he would come to class, and this happened about 5 years ago, and students would shy away from him, and he couldn't explain himself. But one day I talked about loving people as they are, seeing people as they are, and it took hold to the class because they began to treat him differently and talk with him and interact with him. And then about 3 weeks later, he came to me. He said, Dr. Spellman, I was getting ready to drop this course because they treated me so badly. But I want to tell you how I got these scars on my face. He said, one night my wife went out. I was coming home from work, and she was out out in the community or whatever she was doing. But the house caught on fire. The fire engines were around the house, and they would not let me go into the house for fear that I would burn up. I went around the back door, grabbed both of my children, put them, and took the flames as I came out the best way I could. And about 60% of my body was burned, but I came out. I'm in pain just about every day. But this is the reason why. I said I have to get skin drafts almost every other week. I have to use all kinds of salves, and I'm in pain most of the time. And when I saw that student walk across the platform to get his degree at graduation, I shed a tear because he had not gone back. He did not shy away because of the way he looked. So here we see artwork that's pretty much, we need to ask the question, why does this look like it looks? Now, in our textbook on page 34, you see figure 2-19. And the Chartres Cathedral is in France, one of the most beautiful cathedrals in the world. And stained glass windows was a way of presenting light and color into a large, dismal building. And so we have these stained glass windows that were put there. Now, if you're not a Christian or never went to a Christian church, it's very hard to understand this. But if you're a Bible student and you've been taught, then that's different. And you see, between the 3rd century and the 15th century, when Constantine became the Holy Roman Emperor of Rome, he ceased to run the Roman Empire by military as much as he wanted to run it through the church. So the church became what was called a patron of the arts. Why? Because the people could not read and they could not write, but they had to be converted and brought into the Christianity. And the way they did it was through the art, through images, through stained glass window, through frescoes, through sculpture. And we're going to see that over and over again. Chris O'Philly is a controversial artist. He, back in 1996, created a work called The Holy Virgin Mary. And if you look at page 45, you'll see in your textbook this painting. Notice how she represents the Virgin Mary. And if you notice the splotches there, that's actual cow dung that he put on the canvas. And many people became furious and offended when they saw this. Al Amato, who's the senator of New York, went berserk because the National Foundation for the Arts, public money, public American money, paid for this exhibit and for it to be shown. And so here's a man that appears to be making fun of Virgin Mary, putting dung on the canvas of a religious figure, when in fact, that wasn't the meaning at all. I've been to West Africa, and I've been to East Africa, and in many places, they don't have trees. The only thing they use and can use to cook meals or to keep a fire is to take straw and mix it with dung from animals, and then they place it in the fire. It smells terrible. I mean, you can't imagine how it smells, but it smells. But the point is, that's what kept people alive, cooking and giving them cooking material. So it was a form of survival. That's what he was trying to say. But I mean, even the Archbishop of New York went off the deep end until he found out what the real meaning was. It was not to insult the Virgin Mary. So we need to look behind the works of art. And so I stress in this course your understanding of this overall thing we call cultural pluralism. See, people have told you that America is a melting pot. That's not true. That we're a great big soup. And you know, in soup, when you put ingredients in, after a while, you lose, or each ingredient loses its identity. And you can taste some tomato, you can taste something, but the point is, a lot of the flavor is lost because it's blended. I say America is a salad, a diverse salad, where tomatoes and cucumbers and lettuce all have a distinct taste, but it's all one salad. Where would we be if we didn't have a Chinese restaurant or an Italian restaurant? Where would we be if we didn't have chicken cacciatore, but that at the same time in the Chinese restaurant, we have chicken chow mein? And so America has what we call mainstream, and then there is a stream outside that is cultural. And we are culturally diverse. We have African Americans, we have Latino, we have people, we don't say Chinese, we see people from the Orient, we see African people, European people, and different cultures coming into the world. We have the Irish, and we have the Asian Pacific, which is really the proper term for many of the people who live in China. But look at this now. We have a culture, and they have a culture. Now, there are certain things in America that are mainstream. One is our monetary system. Secondly, air and water. We don't have black and Latino water. Being facetious here. We don't have black and Latino cars. We don't have, our money isn't a different color for each cultural group. So we have a lot of things that we share. All of us have, hopefully, widescreen TVs now because we went into digital. But now look outside that large circle and you see, and it's not a subculture, it's a culture that overlaps. So we have Irish, and we have African American, we have Italian, we have Latino, we have Asian Pacific. And on the left, look at those areas where differences are found. And this is where we begin to understand artwork from a cultural point of view. So we have customs, we have ethnic customs. In Ethiopia, I went to a couple's house, and they take their food and they feed you. Most of us would consider that to be absurd. In an Arab house that I went to for dinner, if I didn't burp, they would be insulted. They would think I didn't enjoy the meal. If I went in Bethlehem, I went to a Christian Arab's home, and the woman took the chicken and broke it up and put it on the plate. Most of you would fall out, with that as being discourteous. But that's a custom of the area. So we have ethnic traditions in your homes, certain holidays, certain festival days. And it's reflected in the music. Remember, we said that art is experience, art is life. It's reflected in the language. There are certain idioms and certain expressions that we use in one group that the other group may not understand. Even art, obviously, and foods. And I just gave you an illustration of how we can take a chicken bought at the supermarket and then move around, and we would have different recipes as we went around each culture. African American may have smothered chicken. You might have obviously fried chicken. You might have chicken stew. In the Italian, you may have chicken chicken cacciatore, chicken Murphy, that'll raise you up, kind of hot, very hot peppers. And then you could go, obviously, to Asian Pacific and have chicken in a multiplicity of different ways. So foods, well, how boring it would be if we just had one flavor representing America. And one of the things I will encourage you about to do is to visit New York, the greatest cultural center in our sphere. And I'm not saying that because I'm an American, but it is. You can go anywhere in the world in New York, particularly when it comes to food. Then there are 4 danger zones that you have to watch out for. And this is what we saw in Ophelia's painting of the Virgin. Some people don't like humor if you don't understand the ethnic background, politics, religion, gender. These are areas you stay away from in discussion many times. But some artists have chosen to embrace them. And we have to watch out for, in the upper right-hand corner, those dangers when we look at a work of art. Broad, stereotypic conclusions, that all, African art is geared toward showing nudity. That's a complete error. And when we study African art, we're going to see that the breasts and the navel are accentuated. Why? Because they're symbols of life-giving. The breasts represent life-giving after birth, and the navel represents life-giving prior to birth. So we have, on page 44 of the text, we see an artist who died from AIDS, Robert Mapplethorpe, and he was another controversial individual who got a grant and was funded by the National Council of the Arts. And Senator Monto went, he did these nudes. He did one piece of artwork that showed a man in a rod being placed down his rectum, and they just thought that was terrible. All right, we have to weigh that against what we've said to be art. What did we say art was? Art is expression. Art is communication. So if that's the case, then if using that as a criterion, then we have to know that Mapplethorpe's work was a piece of art and is a piece of art, and yet it's subject to opinion in terms of how one sees or interprets it. Now, there's a story around every artist's painting. Look at Gauguin, who was shipwrecked on the island of Tahiti, painted some of the most beautiful paintings of the Tahitian women. And we will study his work, and when we go to the museum, we'll see one of the individual works or the originals. And that's the great part about going to a museum. But to really understand art, too, we need to look at its second definition, which is art is communication. And in communication, you have 5 components. You have a sender, which sometimes we call an encoder, but for this course, we want to call this individual the artist, the individual from which the art form is generated. Someone has to decide to paint or to put into sculpture what Mapplethorpe did, and that's what he thought. He became the sender, or in this case, the artist. Then you have a receiver, and that's the person who looks at the work of art. And we are all viewers. That's the individuals who may see and interact with the work of art. Now, is it possible for the receiver to get the wrong message? Absolutely. Is it possible for the receiver not to receive the message at all? Absolutely. And so, in the third component of the communication process is the message. You must have a message. You can have an artist and you can have a receiver, but if nothing's on the canvas, then it's just a piece of canvas. But inside that which is used, we have to have a message. And in order to get that message across, we have what is called a medium, or plural, media, the tool used by the artist for expression. So in this case, you can use TV, radio, print, paint, sculpture. That's your medium that is used in order to convey the message. And then last but not least, this is what made Larry King very famous, you have to have feedback. And that's what we're doing in this course. We're giving feedback, we're giving responses, we're giving our reactions, and what we called earlier art criticism. So, reviewing it, we have in the communication process, we have a sender and a receiver. We have the sender, the encoder, is the artist. Then we have the receiver. And sometimes the receivers don't get the message from, or the viewers, from the artist. Then we have the message, that which is communicated. And I'm going to give you a copy of this diagram. And then we have the medium, the tool used by the communicator to bring or send the message. That could be television, or that could be a letter, that could be a song, that could be a poem, but that's the tool used. Maya Angelou was a fantastic poet and was able, and they said that when she went to write her poem, she would go and sit by the river, and she would have 2 or 3 legal yellow pads. She'd have several sharp pencils. She'd have a Bible. She'd have a thesaurus, and she'd have a dictionary, and she would just work and bring those ideas together into a magnificent poem. Then, of course, we have feedback, response, and reaction. So, would you buy a necklace like this? Matter of fact, could you find a necklace like this in New York or anywhere else? Probably not. I was fortunate enough to visit the Maasai tribe in East Africa. And this woman has hair with a band around it, but the people with which I visited, the women shaved their hair off, and the men would put a lion's mane on their heads. And so in Tanzania and in South Africa, women stretch their earlobes, and so as to make larger ears and earrings, can be very painful. And then they make and weave their necklaces. Look at this fantastic necklace up against that rich brown skin. So we come to a point in art, and I said that's one of the things we wanted to do in this course. Increase your perception. What is your perception? Your perception is it's our awareness of objects, people, and conditions in the world around us. If you walk, and you can do this, you can be outside Madison Square Garden there on 42nd Street and 7th Avenue, and when 5 to 5 comes, people want to get to those trains, you could have a heart attack. They will walk over you because their minds are getting to the train, not seeing you as a person in need of help. So if you don't watch it, this is what we call object seeing. So perception is our awareness of conditions, and perception is being able to see the hidden meanings of things. Now I'm going for our discussion, a couple of discussion questions. I'm going to ask you what you see. I'm going to see how sharp your perception is. And then I showed you a picture of a car. What was wrong with that car? And I want to see and test your perception. And I want you to tell me in one of our discussion responses, what's wrong with that car? So perception is to see things as they really are and dream, imagine, and contemplate a changed result. In other words, when you look at a caterpillar, you're not looking at the final result. One day that will become a butterfly. So as we move toward conclusion of this Camtasia, I hope you're enjoying this course. This is showing us, let's take the most famous painting around the world, the Mona Lisa. It's a very small painting by Leonardo da Vinci. But look how artists have interpreted, many artists have interpreted the same subject matter. So we have the subject matter, the Madonna, but the expression, some abstract, some with monochromatic emphasis down on the right-hand corner, just the blue, or a print, or multicolor, or even the one that's here, looks like a distorted way. So art has many different purposes, and I want you to put these in your notes. First, art inspires, and you can see I've been inspired throughout my lifetime with artwork. And you can be inspired by a dress you see, or a suit, or a car, and other objects that inspire you. Obviously, art beautifies, but art is not that's not the only purpose. Everything that you buy in an artistic way is not to beautify. To inform. How do we know how the Egyptians lived and what they had? And when I showed you the Tutankhamun mask, you saw they had gold. You saw that they had eyeliner. You saw that they could form an object in solid gold to inform us, to teach us. And teaching was the major use of art down through the years. They used painting and sculpture. The Catholic Church between the 3rd century and the 15th century dominated and had a patron. They were the patrons of art. They would sponsor art. The Sistine Chapel, painted by Michelangelo, the Pope wanted Michelangelo to paint 40 panels of the Old Testament story in order to teach. The people could not read or write. Art records history. We know what we know about Egypt and ancient Egypt 2,500 years ago and all through their artwork. The pyramid still stands. The Great Pyramid of Giza, which we call Cheops, is almost 4,500 years old. Now, when we study mathematics, we study Pythagoras. C squared equals A squared plus B squared. And Pythagoras lived around the 4th century BC. But did you know the Egyptians knew what Pythagoras gave us in 2500 BC. They knew a perfect isosceles triangle, and the proof of the matter is it still lives today. Art is designed to persuade as well, and that's what advertising does. Persuade you, to entertain you, and then to get you to spend. To transform your mind, advertising does this. And then certain kinds of things designed to stimulate or humiliate or even anger you. They did a painting of the Mayor Washington in Chicago one time and sort of like made fun of his figure and put it in the Chicago Institute, and people went in there and ripped it down because they were angered that some art. Was it expression? Yes. Was it art? Yes. Did they have the right to snatch it down? No. But you can understand their point of view. Now, up in the upper left, we'll talk about him later on, but Alexander Calder, he's in our textbook, did works for the public artwork. And, of course, the bottom piece is Michelangelo's David. Religious subject matter created during the Renaissance. And the Greeks believed that 21 was the ideal age. And of course, in other words, everything ascended to that period. And then people only lived to be 45 years old. So when you do the math, but Michelangelo, this is how he saw David. He didn't know David, but he created a David in which he was athletic and he looked like the Greek classical figures. And we're going to talk about that because the Greeks believe the body, Plato said, the body is the temple of the soul. So the Greeks did, so the Renaissance was a rebirth of those values found during the classical times in Greece and Rome and placed into physical form during the Renaissance. The subject matter was religious. The subject matter was biblical. The content, however, represented the style of the Greeks and Romans and represent. So the role of the artist is very, very simple: to express events and experiences and the world as seen through the eyes of the artist. And secondly, to express the emotional, political, or even romantic interpretation of what it's seen. But it keeps going through the eyes of the artist and may or may not be actually the way things are. So in this course, there are many arts, but in this course, it's a visual arts course. What are the visual arts? We have painting, which is in a two-dimensional presentation. Painting, or two dimensions, has length and width. So that means a print, and we can have a watercolor, we can have acrylics, we can have fresco, oil, gouache, with charcoal, anything that's on a piece of paper or a flat surface and has length and width is two-dimensional. But in sculpture, that's the second of the visual arts. It's a work which tends to take on dimensions. And I'm talking about three-dimensional work. That has length and width, but it also has volume, it has mass, and weight. Architecture is really a piece or a field of sculpture, but it has a functional use. We house something. We have bathrooms, we have galleries, we have offices, we have surgery, we have discovery laboratories. And so the building takes on those three words that I talked about earlier: form follows function. It looks like what it has to do. And we're also talking about the interior. So we're going to study architecture, different types of architecture, and we will see that we will visit even one of the largest churches in the world, the Cathedral of St. John Divine. Then we have the fourth of the visual arts, which is photography. And then last, we have the new one, digitized computer graphics. I'm able to call and talk to you and record and to put slides up because of digital graphics. I'm able to show you down here St. Peter's Square or the Sistine Chapel, where Michelangelo worked for 9.5 years, or St. Peter's Square, here where the Pope lives, or where the Sistine Chapel or St. Peter's Basilica. We're going to go to all these places, but for right now, let's pay attention to one, knowing the story or interpreting a story. I'm going to give you a discussion question. Knowing the story behind a work of art. What do you think it is? How is the artist communicating to you? And in another assignment question, I want us to talk about how we look at public art. What's the difference between public art and gallery art? And what are the motives behind it? Public art and murals and things that we see out in the street, they don't charge admission. They don't sell. Some of the most beautiful murals have been destroyed when the building came down. But it's designed for people. A lot of public art, you have multiple artists working on a mural as opposed to a painting where you have one. So we are going to see a multiplicity of things. So I'm going to give you an assignment, and it will be written out very carefully. And I want you to look at the work of art. It's called The Undiscovered Amerindies. Amerindians, where the artist is putting a satirical political question to us. We have a tendency to look at Native Americans, call them Indians, associate them, but also with Mexico, and it's a Mexican artist who does that. And he's saying that you make differences. You shut us out. There are many messages coming through in that work, and we're going to discuss that, and then I want you to write about it. So don't forget, on Tuesday night at 8 o'clock, we have a conference call, and any of your questions that need to be answered. In other words, all 28 of us are going to be online or on the telephone at the same time, and we will have a discussion. And I'm there for clarity so that I can answer any questions you have, and anything about grading. I know some of the earlier questions, you're worried about how you're going to be graded, but this instructor grades your work, and I'm looking forward to everyone getting an A. Remember, the first time you fail is the last time you try. As long as you keep trying, as long as you seek an understanding, but if you really take this course on, you're going to have a lot of fun. Have a good day.